It is 9:30 p.m. on a Saturday night here in my house, and I am too excited to wait any longer to film this video. I have been waiting so long to do this tutorial, and things kept coming up and getting in the way, and I was putting it off. But tonight I am starting the tutorial for the Norma jeans train case from Sunday Girl Designs. The bag that I'll be sewing up tonight will be the fourth one of this pattern I've made, and I have loved each one I've made. We're going to jump right in because, like I said, it is late and I'm too excited to wait until morning to start doing this. So let's go ahead and look at all the pieces we're going to need to sew up this pattern. I will have the link for this pattern in my description of the video. So for this bag, we're going to think of things in sets of threes. Here's one of my main panels with foam attached onto it. Now, typically I keep this out of the seam allowance, but I forgot. It'll be okay. It'll just look a little bulky on the seams, but if you want to do yours a little bit easier on a domestic machine, definitely keep the foam out of the seam allowance. I'm using cotton woven for my material, and I'm using this print for both the inside and the outside of the bag. If you are doing yours with different prints, you will really only see the exterior piece here and here, top and bottom. So if you're cutting out different prints, only cut 2 for the exterior and attach foam to it. The other 4, because you'll have 6 in total, will be your lining print. This is my lining. I'm going to have 3 that are only cotton woven with a medium weight interfacing attached, and then I'll have 3 that will have foam attached. One of your lining pieces will have foam attached. That's going to be the one in the middle that will provide support between the 2 layers. So to recap, I will have 3 with foam attached and 3 with only a medium weight interfacing attached. The next thing I want to talk about is the bands. If you can see here, we're going to have a lower, middle, and upper band. They're all different size, width, but the length is all the same. On every one I've made, I've liked to do this middle piece with a contrast, just for a little extra pop of color. You don't have to. You could do them all the same. You could do each one different, your choice. But for mine, my 2 upper and lower will be the same print, and my middle will be the contrast. You're going to have both an exterior and lining for those pieces. For my exterior pieces, I will be attaching foam. So for my upper, this is what it'll look like, foam attached. Here is going to be the lining with just a medium weight interfacing attached. Here is going to be the middle piece with foam for the exterior, the lining, just the woven interfacing. Same thing for that lower piece. We'll have the lining and the exterior. Those are the 3 pieces that'll make our band. After we sew these together with the zippers attached, then we will have 2 back pieces. We'll have an upper and lower back piece that we will attach after we attach our zippers. I went ahead and added foam to the exterior pieces, and I also have 2 lining pieces that I've set aside, but I will pull those out too. So you will have 1 exterior and 1 lining of this piece, 1 exterior, 1 lining of this piece. The other thing I'm going to attach to mine is I'm going to attach a mesh pocket. This is the way the mesh pocket will look. I'm doing 2 of these, so one of these I've already prepped and have it ready to go. But the other one we're going to sew together. I cut out my piece of mesh with the pattern piece given, and then I went ahead and cut out a piece of fold over elastic. Mine is a 1/2 inch, and I just folded it over the raw edge of the mesh and clipped it on. So we will sew this, and then we will attach it to one of the lining pieces. With this pattern, every single exterior piece will be attached to a lining piece. So for this one, I went ahead and attached that pocket to the lining piece, and I went ahead and sewed it wrong sides together with an exterior. There is a piece of foam sandwiched in between. You will do this with all of the pieces. So here's one exterior with foam. I will put a lining wrong sides together and attach it. Now for this one, I won't attach it yet because I'm going to add piping and a handle onto this as well. So there's a couple steps I'll take for that one. For the bottom piece, that one will be our top. For the bottom piece, I'm going to attach purse feet. This is optional. I've already done it to the 3 here, and we'll do the 4th one together, but we'll go ahead and do those as well after we get those purse feet all attached. Then we will take that lining piece and sew it wrong sides together. We're also going to have piping, like I mentioned. I'm only going to add piping to the top of my bag. You can add it to both the top and the bottom, or you can skip it altogether, your choice. I'm not going to go into great detail about the piping. I just did a video where I went into a lot of detail about piping. I will link that in the description. So if you're new to piping or still struggling, you can watch that video to get every detail, but I will show you how I attach it and go over it whenever we get to that point. The handle is a really unique way of doing a handle. You can see here that we have 2 pieces that are going to be put together for the handle. One is called the center. I think the other one's called the outer. I'm not for sure, but this one's definitely the center. The way you're going to do that is you're going to cut it, and I'll show you. This will be one of the first things we sew, and I'll explain it in a little bit more detail when we get there. The other thing I'm going to need is zipper pulls. I'm going to use 4 zipper pulls on mine because I like to have them in the middle. You don't have to do that. You could have just one on each side and have them hanging there on the sides. Your choice on that. But those are the only pieces we will need besides binding, which I haven't cut out my binding yet. I'm debating on using just a pre-made binding to make this a little bit easier because we will have to bind the top and the bottom. So now that we've talked about all the pieces, let's go ahead and start going through the prep work of this pattern. I know it looks difficult and challenging, but this pattern's really not. I think you will be surprised at how quickly everything comes together. So now that we've talked about all the pieces, we're going to put a couple things aside. I'm going to try to work on this bag a little slower. A couple people have asked me to do my tutorials a little bit slower, and so I'm going to try to do that. If this is going too slow for you, please let me know and I'll try to adjust the speed, but I want to try to make sure that everybody feels like they can get a good solid information base from my tutorial, so I'm going to slow things down just a little. I'm going to set this stuff aside, and I'm first going to pull out my bottom base piece. This is my exterior looking at. Here is the foam on the back. You can see I've already have 3 purse feet attached. The pattern piece gives you the markings for the placement of your purse feet if you decide to do them. This is completely optional and you do not have to. So I've already transferred the markings over, and my purse feet are just very cheap feet. I get them on Amazon. They are the basic prong feet. You can buy more expensive ones. You can buy ones that screw in or ones that even rivet in. After I have my markings placed, I take my seam ripper, I put it in the hole to where I've marked it, and I just gently pull to make a small slit in the bottom of that between both the foam and the exterior. I don't go hard, I don't go fast, I just do a little slit. I can always come back and make it bigger, but I can't make it smaller if it's too big. If you're nervous, you can put a little bit of fray check on there, but where my slit is so small, I've never had problems with it. I take my purse foot and I just feed it through the exterior side, just push that through. It'll pop out if your hole is big enough. You can put a layer of interfacing here on the back. I don't feel I need it since I have the foam, so I just stick my fingernail in between these 2 pieces to get them started to spread open, the 2 prongs. Once I get it spread a little bit apart, then I will just push my fingers on them to spread them open completely. I've seen some people add a piece of masking tape on the bottom of this if they need to. I don't feel I need to, so I'm okay, and I feel like this part is complete for me. The next thing I'll do is I'll pull out one of those lining panel pieces. I'm just going to attach these wrong sides together, place a few clips around here, and then I will just base this in place, and it will be ready to use once we get to the main end. This will be one of the last pieces we put on, is this base piece, the bottom piece, so we'll go ahead and get it clipped and continue working with everything else. but we will baste it together once we start sewing. So that is the first thing I have ready. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull out my top piece. This is going to be my top where I'll have my handle and also where I'll put my piping on. Piping is not challenging. Like I said, I have a really in-depth tutorial on it, so I'm going to go over this one pretty quickly. Since my print is directional, I know I want to attach my piping in the back. I've already figured out the math for this. I know what my seam allowance is. I know how wide my piping is, and so I'm just going to be able to match up those raw edges. And I'm going to put one clip right here to get that started. When I start sewing my piping, I will not start sewing here and go back stitch here. I will actually start where this clip is and back stitch here and start sewing it all the way around. I want to leave this part unattached for whenever I close up the piping whenever I come to the end. I will show you that when I get to that point, but we are going to match up the raw edges and sew all the way around. I will do this with a basting stitch, which means I will just do 1/8 of an inch away, not the full seam allowance yet. When I come to the curves, I will go slow and I will kind of keep those curves in line. For me, I don't have any problems doing this. If you're having trouble, if it's thick, you could cut notches if it is not wanting to go around the curve smoothly. So that will be another step I do once I start sewing, is attach my piping. The other thing I'm going to do whenever I first start sewing is the binding for this mesh pocket. You could easily cut a piece of cotton woven or use a piece of already made binding, but what I'm going to do is use that fold over elastic. You can see that I have a little bit of overhang here. I just have this clipped over in half wrong sides together, but I will start sewing here 1/8 of an inch away from the raw edge. And I guess it's not really a raw edge, it's a finished edge, but I will sew 1/8 of an inch away from this edge of the binding. I start sewing here because I feel like it's a little easier to get started, but when I come over to the mesh, that is when I'll actually back stitch. And I'll keep going all the way across that 1/8 of an inch away until I get to the other side, and then I will back stitch again. Then I will trim these off whenever I'm done, the extra of the fold over elastic off. Mesh and fold over elastic are both really stretchy, so when I have this at the machine, I'm going to go slow. I'm not going to try to rush through it. I'm going to take it very slow, one stitch at a time, kind of holding to keep things flat, because I don't want tugging and pulling from the feed dogs or from even me just pulling it with my hands. I want it to go slow so everything stays kind of stabilized and not stretched out too much. So that will be another thing I do. I'm going to stop there and get those things going. Lots of times I do everything all at once, but I do know that some people get a little stressed out when I'm doing all the things at once. So we'll start here and sew up these things, and then we will come back to discuss the next steps. So now I'm getting close to where that overlap's going to be. I'm going to go past that overlap, maybe about 1 inch, and make my first cut. I'm going to peel back these, or separate maybe I should say, this piping here to expose that cording inside. I will pull that cording out, and I want to cut it so that it will not overlap with the other cording in the piping that I attached in the beginning. So I'm going to lay that flat, and I'm going to see, I don't know if you can see it clearly, but I'm cutting it off just so the two pieces of cording will butt up against each other. After I make that cut, I'm going to fold down the raw edge of the piping that's free. I'm going to lift up the piping that I started in the beginning and just nestle the original piping inside this piping that is at the end. If I made the proper cut, everything will fit in perfectly. and I'll be able to just finish sewing and attach those two pieces. So now I have my piping attached to my top exterior piece. I have my exterior with the purse feet, this will be the bottom, and the lining piece attached to it. And then I have one piece of mesh with the binding attached to it. So like I had said, this bottom exterior with the purse feet is going to be one of the last things we attach. So I'm going to set it aside. We are done working with it for the time being. This mesh pocket, I'm going to go ahead and trim off that extra fold over elastic, and I'm going to attach it to one of the lining pieces. And I will line up the pocket, matching up all the edges. If there's any overhang, I'll trim it at the end. And you can see me, I'll be holding my hand down even while I'm sewing it to keep everything smooth, because the elastic and the mesh tends to want to kind of bubble up. So I'll be keeping that flat while I sew it. The top piece, we're not ready to put on the handle just yet, so I'm going to keep it close. I'm not going to set it too far away from me. I am going to go ahead and take this other piece that I did off camera. I'm going to take it and set it aside. I won't need it right now. So I will be basting this piece on. I'm also going to pull out the handle. That's the next thing I want to work on. For your handle, if you do it exactly the way the pattern is written, you should have two pieces. Your exterior piece, the piece that's going to be wrapping around, this will be, I can't remember what it's called, but this piece right here, the bigger piece, we're going to, for me, that is going to be the black piece. The rainbow color is going to be the center piece. So what we do is we take, and I'm going to go ahead and unclip this. I went ahead and drew a line down the middle. I folded the long raw edges in there. I had also used the pattern measurement that it gives you to draw a line and folded that short edge down so the raw edges will be hidden. We do that on this side and the same thing on this side. So I'll show you again. You fold the long edges to the line in the middle. You make the mark from that short edge that's given in the pattern and fold that down. So this is what this piece looks like now. For that center piece, what you do is you draw your line down the middle and just fold the long edges to it. I will take the raw short edge of this and I'm just going to place it right inside there. I'm going to go ahead and fold those handles in there, and she tells you how far to place it in, but basically it's going to kind of match up with that folded edge you just did. Now I'm going to fold that raw edge around there, and I'm going to put a clip here in place. I want to make for sure this is centered, so I'm going to set it down so I can center it. It will matter in the end, so take your time to make sure that the center piece of the handle is centered inside the other main piece of the handle. And I'll put some clips there, and then I'll hold that up so you can see it. So it is tucked inside there. You can see it tucked inside. Now I'm going to stitch this, but I only want to stitch just this little bit on this handle. I don't want to stitch from edge to edge because those stitches will show and I don't want them to. So I'm just going to kind of base this in place just so it's secure for this next little bit. So first I will sew this. Actually, let me go ahead and sew this, and then I'll work on the handle slowly so we can kind of talk through it, because it's only going to take a second to do that basting stitch. You can see how my mesh is trying to want to bunch up, so I'm going to keep holding and pushing it flat and going a little bit slower so I don't have that gapping and bunching. Now the pattern does tell you that in replace of one of these mesh pockets, it actually says do one mesh pocket and do one zipper pocket, but I wanted to do both mesh pockets, so that's why I chose that. But you can easily put a zipper pocket on this lining piece if you want to. Now I will have to trim off the overhang on this, and this will eventually be attached to the back of my top, but I want to do my handle first. So I'm going to set this aside, I will trim that up, and now I'm going to work on that handle piece. So what I'm going to do is just baste, like I said, that center portion in there. So you can see that center portion's in. I'm just going to go across here. I am going to lock in the stitches so it won't come out, but I do not want to sew from one side to the other or it would show. So let's look at what I got. Just a few stitches there to kind of tack it in place. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to fold it over. You can see you got that beautiful finished edge there. This is why I said you want it to be centered, because you wouldn't want it to be overhanging. These are going to be pushed wrong sides together, so both of the folded edges would go together. Now that I'm starting to get that in place, I'm going to put a few clips there just to hold everything nice and smoothly, making sure I'm having equal amounts on both sides. Equal amounts showing on both sides, I should say. When we get to the end, we can see we have this raw edge here. What we're going to do is we're going to tuck that edge down into this, just like the other one was. It takes just a slight bit of finagling to get it perfectly tucked in there, so just don't rush it. Take your time. It should be flush once you get it. You can see now it's tucked in there. Everything looks beautiful. A beautiful way to do a handle so that you have no raw edges or anything exposed. Just gorgeous. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sew all the way around this rectangle, and the way I'm going to sew it is I'm just going to sew 1/8 of an inch away from the centerpiece, my watercolor rainbow print side. That's what I'm going to sew that 1/8 of an inch around. I won't be sewing actually on this handle, the black part. You could if you wanted to, but I just don't see any point in that. While I'm sewing it, I'm just going to make sure if I need to shift this, I will. I want this to stay, this watercolor piece, the center piece, to stay centered in the middle. That handle is gorgeous. Such a beautiful handle. I love it. I love the way that's done. I'm not seeing any other patterns do that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use the markings on the pattern piece for this main panel. I'm just simply going to transfer the marks and put it right exactly the way it has. I'm going to do that off camera though, because I do not want to get the pattern piece on camera, just out of respect for the designer. I don't do that. So I'm going to get the markings and get this in place, and then I will come back and sew it once I have it ready to go with the markings. I used chalk to make 2 spots so I can know where exactly I'm going to fit in the ends of this handle. It's going to have a little bit of a lift on it, which is what we want. You can also attach rivets if you want to this. You can sew the square with the extra, whatever you want to do, whatever you feel most comfortable with. So I'm going to go ahead and attach this handle, and after I get my handle attached, then you're going to see me go ahead and baste this lining piece on. So now all of these pieces are attached with an exterior and with the lining. We do have the one that's in the middle that's actually 2 lining pieces. All 6 of those have been sewn together, so now we have 3 sets. So that part is done. We're going to start working now on the zipper panels. So this is going to be in sets of 2. We're going to set our back pieces aside. And what we're going to do is we're going to work with our bottom 2 pieces. Our bottom 2 pieces we're going to attach together with 1 zipper. Our middle and upper pieces we're going to attach together with 1 zipper. So at the end of this, we will have 2 zipper panels, 2 zipper gussets, whatever you want to call it. So the first thing we'll do is we'll work with the middle piece first. I'm going to pull out those 2 upper pieces, and we'll start with our middle. Now for me, this watercolor print is going to be my exterior. So I will lay my zipper on top of it, right sides together, just like we always do. We're going to match up this top raw edge of the zipper, or the top edge of the zipper tape, with the raw edge of this watercolor print. Let's just put 1 clip in there just to show what we're doing and keep it all held together. For me, I always like to have overhang with my zipper, so you can see I have overhang on both sides. I will take this lining piece and I will match up the short edges of this middle panel, and I'm going to have the lining and the exterior right sides together. The zipper will be sandwiched in between. If you don't feel comfortable sewing it this way, you could easily just do baste one at a time. I typically do, but where I have to get through both of these, I'm just going to go a little bit quicker. It'll be fun. I'll be watching for shifting, but just know you can do one at a time, the basting, or you can do them both together. I will continue clipping this, but before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and set this aside and do the same thing with this bottom. The piece with the foam is your exterior. Take your zipper, place it right sides down on the top edge. If your print's directional, you're attaching it to the top. Go ahead and put a few clips there. Again, you can baste this if you need to. Take your lining piece. If it is directional, make sure you have the print orientated the right way. Match up the short edges and the long raw edges with that zipper tape sandwiched in between. Just like we do in lots of zipper gussets and things, this is the exact same way, making that same zipper sandwich. I'm going to finish clipping these, and then I'm going to sew this bottom piece, the lower piece I think it's actually called, and the middle piece. I will sew both of those, and then we will come back to turn them and top stitch them. So now that I have both of these sewn together with the zippers in between, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull them to where they are wrong sides together, and I will just clip the bottoms of these pieces. I'm finding, like I've said in my other videos, that by clipping the bottoms first and basting that raw edge first, I'm able to get a better top stitch. I do want to tell you on this bag that you will be able to top stitch here and on both of these, but you will not be able to top stitch this middle piece here. If that bothers you to have that discrepancy, you might not want to top stitch. It doesn't bother me so much, so I'm going to continue to do that. But if it does, I just want to make that note to you. So what I'm going to do now is do this for both this piece and this bottom piece here. After I have them clipped together, baste that bottom edge, then I'll top stitch this edge here on the bottom piece, and then this piece I will top stitch here on this middle piece. Those upper pieces, I'm going to attach them to this part of the zipper the same way I did this here. At that point, what I'll do is I'll add my zipper pulls on here and then trim up the zipper tape on both sides. So I will speed up this part while I do this so you don't have to watch all of these steps in real time. So at this point we have our bottom panel with the zipper attached. I went ahead and added my 2 zipper pulls and I trimmed off the edges of my tape. I also have the middle and upper panels attached with my zipper pulls and I trimmed up the edges there. Now what we're going to do is we're going to pull out those little back pieces. We have the top part. This is going to be for the portion with the upper and middle. I also have that lining piece. And then I have the back for the lower parts, and that has an exterior lining as well. Now the way we're going to do this is just like we would any other gusseted bag. I'm going to take this part and I'll show you how we do one at a time, but they're basically the same. We will take this exterior piece with the foam attached and we'll place it right sides together, just matching up that short end. Sometimes I have to trim mine because I typically don't get as close to my zipper tape. You know, I don't sew it with the proper seam allowance just because I want more of the tape to show. So sometimes you might have to trim off the width, not the length. I'll go ahead and clip those short edges together, right sides together. Then I'm going to go ahead and flip it. First thing I'll do is make sure that it is orientated correctly. Then I will flip it over, take that lining piece and place it right sides together with the lining, making sure it is orientated correctly also. And just clip that in place there. I'm going to do the same thing with this bottom piece. These pieces will be right sides together, but you will be sewing. There will be nothing against this top of the zipper here, so that is completely normal. That's the way it should be. You'll still sew it just the same. So clip those short sides together. Flip it over and attach your lining the same way. You're going to sew this with the seam allowance given in the pattern. Now this is the first time we're sewing something where the seam allowance really matters. Lots of times when we're sewing things, it's a little bit more of like, okay, like with the zipper tape, if I don't get it exactly the right way, it's a little bit okay. It's not going to cause too big of a problem. But if we do not sew these pieces on with the right seam allowance, our gusset or these panels might not fit that main panel of the bag. So make sure you sew with the proper seam allowance, back stitch on the top and the bottom. Then we will pull these wrong sides together. We will top stitch on this back piece here. So let's do that for both of these pieces. So I have these sewn together and top stitched, and now what we're going to do is the same thing. Let me flip this around. The same thing to attach it to this other side. Pulling the exterior together is pretty easy. You'll just pull it and clip it just like we did the other one. But getting that lining to attach is a little bit trickier. This is that step, and if you want, you can go ahead and base this exterior. But what you're going to have to do is you're just going to have to tightly roll this whole piece together. I'm going to push that down in there. And now that I have a tight roll, I'll be able to flip that lining so that I can get it right sides together with that lining piece. So this is what it looks like. Like I said, you can base this if you're worried about shifting because there is a lot of things going on here. It shouldn't be too hard to keep them all together since there's a short distance, but just check and make for sure everything lines up. After we sew this, we're going to top stitch just like we did on the other side, and I'm even going to baste these edges together. Once I have that all taken care of course I'll push this out. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. This will be the last step I do. It is almost midnight now, and I don't want to start making mistakes. Even though I'm not really tired, the later it gets, the more chance of mistakes. The more chance there is that I'll be making mistakes. So what I'll do is I'll finish this side up, and then I'm going to go ahead and mark the centers of these panels and my main panels. I'll get all the centers marked, and so in the morning all I'm going to do is start putting things together. So it'll be a very quick sew once we get everything situated at that point. It is a tight little burrito getting these all folded together so we can sew across it. So these are the two I'm going to sew with the seam-ons given the pattern. Make sure when you're sewing it that this part's not creeping up. You can see I have a pretty good gap there, but just in case, make sure. And then we will flip it out and top stitch it. So now that I have that pulled apart, what I'll do is I'll baste these two edges and then I'll top stitch on this other edge just so it matches that. I'll do the same thing on this one. I think I'm going to have to trim a little bit off the top of this. It's a little uneven there, but it's perfectly fine on the bottom. So I just have my cutting wrong there. So I'll baste these two edges, top stitch on this side. And then, like I said, what I'll do is I'll make my center marks on both of these pieces and my other panels. And in the morning, we'll start putting everything together and finish everything up. So let's look at everything we have and go ahead and talk about the pieces, because now it's time to put everything together. Here is the lower exterior with the interior and a zipper attached. I went ahead and marked all my corners. I did baste this back piece. I have it all basted so it's one piece. I'm going to have this right sides facing out. I have the upper and middle exteriors attached to the zipper with the linings added onto them as well. And I also have this back portion attached and basted and top stitched as well. Here's my top with my handle. You may have rivets on yours. Here's my piping. You may or may not have piping on yours. I do have a slip pocket here with mesh. You could have a mesh pocket here, or you could have nothing at all on yours. Here's our bottom piece. I do have feet attached to mine. You may or may not have feet on yours. I do have a lining piece attached to it as well. And then this is the middle piece with another mesh pocket. You might have a zipper pocket on yours, or you may have nothing on yours. On the other side, it's completely blank. Nothing on it, just the lining. So these are the pieces we have, and now we're going to start working with them. We're going to take out this middle section. This is not the top, we will set aside. The bottom we'll set aside. This part we will set aside and pull out this bottom with the zipper exposed and this middle piece. I'm going to keep this right sides facing out, and I went ahead and had my center marks on everything. I decided to do clips, like little snips for my center marks on almost everything, and I did do quarter marks too, except on my zipper. I will not cut into my zipper, I never do. So I used a marking tool to make those, but I have quarter marks on all of these and on all of my panels. This just helps this to go easier. Where you're sewing in a curve, it's easy for things to shift, and this is just a little bit of insurance that you'll get everything put on there properly. So I want my slip pocket piece to be going down. That way, whenever I open this up, my slip pocket will flip up. I want to make sure I attach this pocket to where it will be opening in the front. This is the back, so I will attach the back to the back. It's going to be this lining piece against the lining here. So you can see I have it set up like this. I'm going to set it down on top, and I'm going to start matching up those quarter marks. It's a little confusing to explain, so I'm hoping the video can help you, as well as the pattern. Working with both those things together will help give you a really good visual and the words to understand how to put it all together. Sometimes you don't know the right ways to explain things when you're doing stuff like this. I'm going to match up another quarter mark here. And I'm just clipping the marks right now. I'm not doing any other clippings. So I will have 4 clips to start with. Before I go around, let's just look how this looks. I don't see my pocket on the front. My pocket is inside. Here is my exterior. We're looking at that. When we look inside, we can see the pocket there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish clipping around. I'm going to take the time to match up all these edges. It's always fit really well, so unless I messed up my cutting this time, it should fit just fine. On the corners, I will just tuck it in just a little to get it to go around. I always try to do my long straight sides first, so that way if I see that one corner has a little bit more room, I will shift things around. But like I said, as long as I did my cutting right this time, everything, this is the fourth one, and all of mine have fit really nicely. If you did not have the foam in your seam allowance, which I meant to do and forgot, yours will be fitting a lot easier. To be, just fitting in there smoother. I do suggest keeping that foam out of the seam allowance. I just forgot on this one. You can see it's fitting just perfectly around the corner. See how that's up just a little bit? I just push it down in there to get those raw edges to match. Perfectly fine. You're not having a lot of overhang. It looks great. Okay, let's look at everything again just visually so you understand. I have everything clipped around. Here is the top of this. Here is the inside. Everything looks good. My pocket, whenever I open, and if you need to check it, you can. When you open it, my pocket will be going the right way, so I'm good there. I'm going to go ahead and close this up, and I'm going to start sewing it. I'm going to sew it like this. And I am going to just base this in place because I'm going to come right back and sew again around it. So I want this based stitch first because I can control it better and I can make sure I catch my corners and curves perfectly when I do that basing stitch. Whenever I attach the next piece, I will come back in with that full seam allowance. I always start in the back just so it's a little bit easier for me if I make a mistake or whenever I'm trying to catch the next ones. It's just better, so I'll start in the back and just start going around slowly. I'll make sure I'm keeping those raw edges together. If I need to use my stiletto or hemostat, I will. Okay, I'm looking around. I did go off a little bit here. Kind of hate that, but that's okay. It'll be fine. I'm just going to trim off that. If I would have went off more than just 1/8 of an inch, I definitely wouldn't be trimming. I'd be going back and redoing it. That little bit is not going to hurt anything. Everything else, I had one spot I needed to, my stitches were a little high up, so I needed to correct that. Other than that, everything looks good. You can see it in there. If you wanted to push this part out, you could. I'm not worried about pushing this part out because this is going to be the middle inside. Whenever I take the full seam allowance, I will definitely push it out and look and make sure everything looks good and like I'm not missing anything and everything looks smooth. Now, we have it looking like this. I have my, here's the back, here's the zipper pulls. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this piece and I'm going to flip it so that it's inside out. I'm going to lay it directly on top of this piece. I'm going to have it upside down. So I have it inside out and I want my skinny, my smaller part, this upper part to be facing down. I'm actually going to be sewing the bottom of the middle to the top of the zipper. So that way it'll be large, the middle, then the upper once we flip it. So I'm going to start putting this on here. I'm going to make sure that I have the back matching, those two back spots. That'll be what I match first. So I'm going to find those center marks and put that on there. And we'll talk through this one more time after I get it all clipped, just so we can make sure we understand how you're putting this all together. So there's the back clipped. Now I'm going to pull this up and do my front clip first. We got a lot of layers here, and where the foam is in mine, mine's going to be a little bit bulkier than yours. Yours will probably be a little bit smoother if you don't have the foam, but it'll still fit, even if you do have the foam. Okay, matching up that front clip. And now I'm going to go to the side. Put your hand in there and smooth that out. You see how perfect that curve is? It's just fitting right in there the way it should. Go over to that last mark and match it up. And now that I have all the marks, I'm just going to start smoothing things around and making sure that everything fits properly and I don't need to adjust anything. Once I start, like, you can see there's a little bump there, but if I push it together, it fits perfectly. So don't get too alarmed, like here you're thinking, oh no, it's not going to fit. Well, one thing is I have those zipper pulls there, so that's going to be a little bit wonky, but when I push it down, you can see it fits perfect. So just keep that in mind. Push those raw edges together. That's what you're sewing around. Your zipper pulls, you'll have to reach in and maneuver those whenever you get to that spot. But everything else you can see is fitting nicely. I do want to point out, look at my foam. If I would have kept the foam out of the seam allowance, look at that bulk I would have avoided there. My machine's going to be able to handle that. That's not the issue. It's just it's going to look bulky in the end, and it's not as fun of a sew. My mistake, I wasn't paying attention. So just do that and you'll save yourself that extra little bit of stress there. And then when you turn it, you won't have like the bulk here, because remember on this seam, we're not going to be able to top stitch. So mine will be a little bit bumpy there because I can't even top stitch and smooth that part down. So it would have been really nice to keep the foam out specifically on these back spots there. So now I've got this all clipped together. Let's go over everything one more time. We have these two pieces right sides together. Here is my lower panel is down here. Here's the middle panel. It's what's attached to the zipper. Here is the other zipper, and here is the upper. Inside, we're still just looking at that mesh pocket. We're not able to see all this. What we'll do now is we're going to sew around this circle, now, or oval. I'm going to go ahead and do it with the full seam allowance. Also, you could go ahead and bind this part right here, but you could wait and attach everything and then save the binding for the very end. That's actually what the pattern says, is just do all the construction, then bind everything at the end. So just know that you can do that and have everything done and completed and then go back. Before I bind this though, after I just sew with the full seam allowance, I will pop it out and we'll look at it and see how I did and see if there's anything I need to correct at this point. I won't have a lot of shifting. I have so much foam in here, there's not a lot of room for things to shift. But if you're having shifting, grab your stiletto, grab your hemostats, whatever you need, and just go slow around the curves. I will sew it the same way I sewed the last time, with these panels against the bed of my machine. So I sewed around everything. I'm just going to flip this to see what it's looking like, to see if I need to go in and correct anything. I know I'm going to have some problems with it being a little bulky, a little poofy. But other than that, I'm looking for the curves. I'm looking for any mistakes. When I pull it out, I'm stretching everything. I see this part. I think I'm going to want to redo that part. But other than that, everything's looking good. That's good. That's good. Yeah, I'm going to redo this area here. I can see how it's kind of dented in, and that is the foam, but I'm going to try to make that part a little bit smoother if I can. And try to come in a little bit more on that area. the time to went back and fix that side there. I feel much better. It looks, you can see now that it's kind of even where it was a little bit like uneven. Now I still have that bulk there. That is because of the foam. That is a Beth issue, not an issue with the pattern. So now we have this. We have our upper, our middle, and our lower. We can look inside. We see we need to bind that. I'm going to wait, I think, to bind everything at the end, so that way it'll be a little bit easier and I won't have to stop filming and things like that. So I'll need to bind that. And then in here, I won't need to bind this one because it is sewn right sides together already. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn this inside out. This whole thing. And I'm going to tuck this part, the inside, down in there. I'm going to be working on this bottom now. So if you remember, this bigger part is the lower panel. I'm working on it. I don't have to worry about smoothing all this out because it's not going to stay this way. I would just have to pop it back in. But now what I have is, this is my lining. So I'm going to take this bottom piece with my feet attached, and now I'm going to attach it right sides together on this lower panel. First thing I'll do is I'll orientate my bag so that this is my back. That is that back panel I'm looking at. I also want to make for sure that I kind of orientate this so that my feet are going, like the print's going in the right direction. So if this is the back, I would want it to go this way. So I'm going to take it and I'm going to lay it down right sides together and start clipping the bottom panel with that lower panel. First thing I'll do is I'll match up those two marks at the back. Then I will come to the front, match up those two marks there. And it's basically going to be the same thing that we did in the middle section. We are matching everything up, and then we will sew around. This will be an edge that we will need to bind as well. But like I said, I think I'm going to save all my binding for the very end. Whenever I get these first set of the 4 quarter marks made, then I will come in and start working on the rest of it, clipping everything around. Make sure, just like you saw in the last section, you got to make sure that these edges are even and matching up. You know, even if you have to push down just a little, get them to match. If you cut everything properly and sewed with the right seam allowance, it's going to work out great. You see my corner is fitting perfectly. My curve, I should say. It's more curved than a corner. I have a little bit of bulk here, so before I clip this one, I'm just going to see. And yes, I can see I have, like, you can see it's uneven there. So I just didn't get them properly centered up. So I'll just shift a little so I have the same amount on each curve. On this one, I'm going to go ahead and sew with the full seam allowance. I'm not doing basting stitch on this because after we sew with this full seam allowance, then I'll just come back and add the binding. So I'm going to sew with the full seam allowance given the pattern all around this perimeter here, and then the only thing we'll have left to do is to attach our top, and then of course we will have to bind everything. Again, I'm sewing it the same way with these panels against the bed of my machine, and that'll make it easier to go around the curves. Back stitch, of course, when you start and stop, keep everything aligned, go slow, and you should be just fine. So we have that base on. Let's just flip that out and see how that looks. You don't have to do this, but I just prefer to. Base looks great. Zero problems with that. I'm good. I'm letting that be. Now we have one piece left to attach. So let me go ahead and zip that back up just so it's not in the way. We are going to, of course, attach it to the top of the bag. I went ahead and unzipped the bag. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this top ring. You can see right now the exterior is facing out. I'm going to flip it back and flip it inside out. So this is the exterior now. This is the lining facing out. This is going to be the back of my bag. My direction's going the right way, my pocket's going the right way. So since this is the back, I'm going to flip it over, right sides together, and attach it to the back here, that back panel. I'm going to put just 2 clips there. They are right sides together. I will lift it up, bring up this part, and clip the front 2 pieces right sides together again. I'm going to go over to the side, match up those quarter marks, right sides together. Come over to the last set of quarter marks and match them up. Now I'm going to clip everything around just like I have been doing, and I can tell right now that I have a little more bulk here than here, so I've just made a little mistake evidently with my quarter marks. So I'm just going to shift that a little so that it's even amounts on both sides so I can work that in. Everything else looks good. Just so you know, you can check this by closing it to make sure everything common sense is working. If you're getting confused with how am I putting this together, how am I clipping it, that kind of helps that common sense check. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clip around the curves just like I did last time, pushing them in so that everything is flush. We have the piping to deal with. When you're pushing, make sure you don't push your piping up so it gets caught. Make sure your piping is sandwiched in between there. I'll probably do just like a peek before I start sewing to make sure I'm not missing it. It's very easy for that piping to flip up where it's kind of thin. I have still a little bit of bulk on this curve. I know it'll fit. I just need to kind of smooth it out so that I'm not getting a big bump when I'm sewing over, but I know everything will fit properly. I've just got to work through the extra spots and make sure it's all evenly distributed. I'm going to just peek and make sure that none of my piping is flipped up and sandwiched in between these 2 parts up here at the top. It's all pushed down properly. Everything looks good. So now it's time for me to sew. I'm just going to sew around this with the seam lines given the pattern the same way I did the other ones. And so at this point I will have it like sewing it like this, but I will have to flip. This whole unit will be rotating as I'm sewing. But now what I'll do is I'll take it and I'll pop it out. And then we're going to look at everything and see how it looks. It actually looks really well. Maybe I could go back right here and tighten that up. See how that's a little bit loose right there? Could probably do it around this corner too. So I think I will go around one more time the entire perimeter, and I think I'm just going to do about a 1/16 of an inch over that previous stitch line I just did, just to kind of tighten up on that piping just a little. Won't be bad at all, just a little bit to help. And I really don't have to. It's just I think it'll look better if I do. So you can see my foot is on, or I don't know if you can see, but my foot is on that previous row of stitches. I'm not going 1/4 of an inch, 1/8 of an inch. I'm barely getting over that because I don't want to lose too much on here or things will start looking odd. So I'm just barely going over just to tighten up that piping just a little bit. Notice that I'm sewing this the opposite way that I did last time, but that's because everything's already stabilized. There's not going to be any shifting of the curves, and so this will just let me have a little bit better wash on that seam, and I don't have to worry about things moving around. I wouldn't have done this as the original stitching, just so you know, because it'd been too risky, I feel like. Okay, let's flip everything out. Let's zip everything up. Let's see how my bag is going to look in the end. Because at this point, everything's done. I'm just going to add the binding around to close everything up. It's going to look great. That is so cute. I love the colors. I love how perfect everything looks. And it's such a big bag. It's so big, and it's just got so much storage in it. So now we've got to bind everything. I have noticed that the binding with this bag, where it is on that curve, where it does kind of sit down, it never looks perfect. I've tried a couple different things, and so whenever I do it, since I know that whenever we flip on the curves, you can see how just the wrinkling even on the regular fabric looks. That's just what's going to happen with your binding too. I've tried with cutting on the bias, using straight everything. It's just the way, the nature of it. Fabric wrinkles, it happens. So since I already know that, I'm going to take the easy route, and I'm just going to do this with waterproof canvas. That's going to save me time because I'm only going to have to sew around each one of these one time. If you wanted to do traditional binding and do the single folds and fold it over, that's great. You're just going to sew around each one of these twice, and I'm just kind of being a little bit lazy. So I've already cut some strips of my waterproof canvas. I am just going to fold one end under, and then I'm just going to wrap it around and clip. I'm going to go around each one of these, and you can see it's just going to cover that edge, and I'm going to clip all the way around and do this on all three of these. So we'll have two at the top and we'll have one at the bottom. After I get everything all clipped, I'm just going to sew it all together with the seam allowance given in the pattern. I'm not going to go over the seam allowance any, because if I do that, I'll change the shape of the bag a little, so be consistent with your seam allowance. And you do want to try to get as close as you can. You don't even want to go under too much, but it would be easier if you went under instead of over. So I'm not going to show you how I'm going to sew this the exact same way that I've sewn it on. I'm just going to go ahead and do this off camera, and then I will come back to show you the binding, and we'll come back with our final thoughts on how the bag looks. Alright, my Norma jeans train case is done. I have everything bound and everything ready to go. Leaving the foam in the seam allowance was definitely an issue for me. I did not mean to. I knew I didn't want to do that, and I accidentally forgot and got that in there. So I definitely highly recommend you don't do that. It does even affect the binding. Like my binding did lay like more like foldy looking than usual because of that extra bulk in the seam allowance. But you can see I have the cute little pocket here. Plenty of room here in the bottom. Let's open up the top. It is a smaller compartment at the top, but still super roomy for things. Another pocket here. I love this train case so much, and I feel like there's a lot of potential for things to do with it. You could use clear vinyl for instead of the mesh. You could use zipper pockets. You could even, I thought of this. Let me open this back up and show you. I even thought about like putting mesh all around here and kind of dividing it up so you could have little small things along the pockets inside there. So I feel like this pattern is full of potential for hacks and new ways to do it. I have made, like I said, this is the fourth one I've made, and these always sell immediately at my shows. People love these. They think they're so cool, and of course they are very unique looking. So definitely try this pattern out. Let me know if you have any questions or concerns. I'll have the pattern linked in my description. My materials are from Jane R. Edwards. Zipper tape is from So Majestic. Zipper pulls are from New Moxie. I'll leave links to that. And I'm also going to leave a link to my more detailed video about piping if you're still getting used to that and working with it. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial, and I hope you guys have a great day sewing, and I hope to see your train cases soon. If you have any questions or concerns, definitely let me know.